Hosts of The Last Word, having the first word on this Monday morning, Lawrence O'Donnell. Lawrence, good to see you.
Great to be here, Mika. Thank you.
Good to have you. What do you make of the next 24 hours in terms of security concerns, chatter on the internet, Trump, of course, trying to make hay over this indictment? And I'm just watching whether or not the judge during the arraignment says, don't talk about this. Don't go on. Gives him some clear lines that perhaps he can't cross.
Well, now that he's a criminal defendant and there is a judge supervising his case, this is the very first time in his life where his speech can be controlled in some way. It's going to be interesting to see when and if the judge takes that step to gag Donald Trump in some way. I mean, you could begin with defendant Trump absolutely no comments at all, none, about the district attorney. You don't even have to say no threatening comments. Just you are not allowed to make a public comment about the district attorney. You can talk about your case, you can do, but you can't mention this person or something to that effect, and start gradually with the way you try to contain his speech, because we all saw the baseball bat, Donald Trump with the baseball bat aimed at Alvin Bragg. How do you stop that? That's a very important question. As to the security issue, I would just ask everyone who is concerned about this, and I am not among them. I am not even slightly concerned about the security issues in Manhattan for this trial, because the 1,000 most insane of Donald Trump's violent criminal followers are either in prison now or facing charges for the last time they rose up to try to preserve his presidency. Very few of them were from New York City. He got 11% of the vote in Manhattan. It's not a place where they're going to surge to the steps of the courthouse for Donald Trump. There's also tolls, to get your pickup truck into Manhattan. So there's a bunch of hurdles here that I think will minimize any possibility of any Trump protest there. And let's not forget, he specifically called for it already. He said Tuesday he gave them a day when they needed to be there. And of course, Jordan Klepper from The Daily Show went right down there to interview the Trump protesters on that Tuesday that Donald Trump demanded that they show up. And he found exactly one. That's how many protesters Donald Trump managed to turn out on the day that he demanded that they turn out. And so all the indications are the 35,000 police officers in the NYPD will have absolutely no struggle handling that. And just for perspective for the audience, the NYPD has more police officers on duty at 12 noon of any day of the year than the entirety of the police forces and military forces that responded to the attack on the Capitol on January 6th. I mean that responded, not the ones who were there at the beginning, but the total that showed up to handle it is smaller than the total number of NYPD officers on patrol at 12 noon on any given day.
Yeah, good luck to anybody trying to push around the NYPD. Mika, by the way, we just do need to clarify.
Okay.
You had no problem getting, and you never have any problem getting your pickup truck in and out of New York City.
Well, it's really, the tolls are terrible, though.
The tolls are terrible.
$12,
but yeah, you.
Yeah, my pickup's good.
She's like,
it's got 2 tanks, so if I run out of gas, I can just switch over to the second tank.
She's like McLeod,
it's a 94.
Going into New York City, big cowboy hat,
plastic seat, and a gun rack.
So let's talk about. We're not going to talk about Mika's pickup anymore or her gun rack. Let's talk instead, though, about how it does seem, Lawrence, that the pace is quickening. What we heard through the years and what we've said on this show is it does seem, if you look back over his 40-year public career, Donald Trump has always been a man who's above the law. The law does not apply to Donald Trump the way it applies to everybody else. But we have this Manhattan case, and despite what Republicans and Democrats say, we don't know what the indictment's going to look like. So we can't judge the strength or the weakness of the indictment yet. And we'll get a little information on Tuesday. But you had over the weekend the Washington Post giving us information on the Mar-a-Lago case, the obstruction charges that
That's heating up.
The call is coming from the inside. They have communications from somebody working for Trump. They have camera footage. They have the evidence that Donald Trump, after he got the subpoena, that he was rummaging through the boxes to try to figure out which documents to keep from them. We also, of course, last week had the attorney-client privilege pierced in another case because the federal judge said it was likely that a crime was committed between attorney and client. So that privilege was pierced as well. It seems that after all of these years, the pace is quickening. And do you suspect that this is just the world that we're going to live in over the next several months between Manhattan and Georgia and the Mar-a-Lago documents case and Jack Smith, a guy who just is not going to take anything off of Trump, and of course the J6 sedition conspiracy, the possibility of that.
Yeah, Joe, I was actually scheduled to take off the first week of May. And now I'm not going to do that because everyone I've talked to with prosecutorial experience in Georgia says that the likely indictment in Georgia will be the first week of May. So I'll be here. I might even make it here on Monday morning of the first week of May for what could be the second Trump indictment week. It's very, very likely to happen there. It's a matter of speedy trial laws in Georgia, Joe, interacting with grand jury schedules, and so that's why the pros are aiming at the first week of May. So we're going to get used to this, and you got to remember that Teflon Don, which was the name that John Gotti got. He was the mafia Don who was Teflon. They couldn't prosecute him. The way he earned the name Teflon Don in the New York Post and the Daily News was he was actually found not guilty 3 times in a row in 3 criminal trials. And then, of course, Teflon Don spent the rest of his life in prison when he was eventually convicted and died in prison. But Donald Trump is not Teflon Don until he gets his first 3 not guilties. And so I will patiently wait to see if he's that lucky in the courtroom.
So, Lawrence, let's talk about the politics of this right now. We've talked earlier in the show, a few Republicans who are eyeing the White House, Asa Hutchinson, Chris Christie, long shots to be clear, have been very critical of Trump. Do you think there'll be a moment here where others may break ranks with the former president as the legal peril mounts? It's one thing to be dismissive of this particular case in Manhattan, let's say, but some of the others looming, including Georgia, are far more serious.
I don't think anyone who polls above 1% in the Republican field will break ranks with Trump. They are just staring at the polls. They're staring at the Trump voter polls. And quite understandably, if you're trying to get the Republican presidential nomination, you need those voters. So you don't want to part with them in this emotional period. I personally, and by the way, let me label this, pure guesswork. In the past, in the pre-Trump era, we could come on shows like this and discuss political expectations based on something we'd seen before. It's like meteorology. Like, the reason we know this hurricane is likely to do this is that's what 99% of them do when they hit that spot, right? And that's what we used to be doing in this field. But Trump has destroyed that because there's absolutely no model for how do you run against a leader of the pack who's under indictment and is facing a couple of more indictments. We don't have a model for how you do that when that person is actually supported by most of the party. And so, these guys are feeling their way along. DeSantis is playing it the most carefully so far, and he's rewarded with second place in the polls for that. But the guys who are polling, at 1% or below, yeah, they might say something contrary to Trump.